But what does it really mean? What is the tactical and strategic interest that India and Australia together are pursuing? And more importantly, as a regional bloc, what is the potential that Quad holds and what are the implications for China? Pathikrit, on all those points, I'm coming to you first. We also have Manju Seth, who's a former diplomat, joining us on the broadcast. Pathikrit, first to you. How keenly are the Chinese watching? What is the message for China? And as my colleague Zaka was pointing out some time ago, that India is one of the areas where Australia is looking to diversify its interests outside Beijing. What kind of support and cooperation in the future that we can look at?
Anusha, first of all, it's a long journey that Australia has traveled from the time of the nuclear test that India did in the late 1990s, when the Australians actually put sanctions, and they were not even very happy with the nuclear agreement in the 2006-7. So today Australia is under severe compulsion. It's a democracy like India, no doubt. We have good relation in terms of sports and everything. A lot of Indians actually feel very comfortable when they go and stay in Australia. There are a lot of Indians who are PR. We have a PR status in Australia. But the problem that Australia has fundamentally, that Zaka also mentioned, is that 40% of their exports were dependent, were China-centric. And what China did after Australia came out with one single statement that there should be an independent investigation into the origin of the Wuhan virus, after that, they put unofficial embargo on every kind of shipping into China that was coming from Australia. That's number one. And so in spite of the free trade agreement, suddenly the Australian economy wasn't desired. So they're looking for an alternative which is far more stable as an economy, and it has a rule of law. It doesn't happen like you have a contract and this contract suddenly goes away as it happens in China. That's number one. It doesn't mean that they're doing away with China. They're actually spreading the basket. Number two, in the Indo-Pacific region, when there's a huge issue about freedom of navigation, Australia is feeling the heat right now. Third, Australia as an economy, relatively it's a little lesser than that of India. In terms of India's blue water capability of Indian Navy, it is far more than that of Australia. Australia, frankly speaking, has never invested that much in defense. They don't have offensive missile systems, they don't have aircraft carriers, they don't have long-range destroyers. So today they are actually looking for collaboration and maritime cooperation. That is a very important thing. See, the 1,500 crore of proposals that are being bilaterals that are being signed today may not actually seem a very big amount compared to $42 billion that the Japanese are pledging to invest in India. But the Australians are looking for a huge market where India is also making sure that we won't have a client-vendor relationship. You just can't have a free trade agreement you export to India and we'll take it. You have to, first of all, become an equal partner of production in this country and develop a resilient supply chain which is decoupled to a certain extent from China and which does not get affected with whatever happens across the world. Another important point, and Anusha, if you look at what happened in Ukraine, it's a classic example of Ukraine being left in the lurch by the West, disowned by the West, and it has been left to fight for itself. Countries like Australia, which are strategic, which are long-term alliance partners of United States, it's not that they have lost their trust in United States, but they're actually having second thought that if push comes to a shove for Australia or countries like Japan, what is the plan B they have? India has a plan B. They don't have a plan B. And so I think while while Quad is very important, they're gradually respecting the stand that India has taken so far as the Russia-Ukraine conflict is concerned. While we have a good relation with the West,
I'm going to take all those 3 points. I'm going to take all those 3 points to Manju Seth as well. It's interesting, Manjuji, there were 2 points that both Zaka and Pathikrit were pointing out, how Australia is wanting to diversify. Could you elaborate on this point? Why is Australia looking to diversify? Is it just about the way Chinese reacted when Australia sought accountability post the Wuhan virus? Is it really about the concept of the search of rule of law? Because that really didn't bother them earlier when they were engaged in a very intensive business relationship for Beijing over the last 4 to 5 decades. Why this tactical shift by the Australians? How do you understand that?
Absolutely, it's a combination of all these. As mentioned by Pratikrit, it is important. Each country, what they are doing. Like India is looking after its own interests. Other countries are also realizing that they need to look after their interests primarily, and cannot be completely swayed by external factors if it's not in their interest. And as he mentioned, it is possible that the US or the other alliance partners who are there with Australia, they might just abandon them. And that's why one of the reasons I think they joined AUKUS was because of this. because they realized that their defense status or defensive status or capabilities were really not up to the mark.
Yeah.
And China, of course, by putting this embargo on Australia, of imports from Australia, has sent a message to Australia and to the other countries. You better fall in line with our way of thinking. Do not criticize us at all in any way. If we feel on our side, so not with, and we will tell you we sent a message that we sort. So I think that kind of has both Japan, and Japan has other also.
Sure.
But Australia, I think, looks at India as as an important democracy.
We'll just try and fix that audio problem with you, Manjuji. We are losing your audio in between. We'll try and fix an audio issue with you. We are facing an audio issue. In the meanwhile, I'll go back to Pathikrit. Pathikrit, I'm trying to scratch the surface here. Most of the experts which have spoken to us in the last couple of hours, and as we discuss and we talk about, our colleagues are indicating how Canberra is looking to diversify. You spoke about the incident when the Wuhan virus and the accountability was sought by the Australians about there should be a thorough and transparent inquiry. Is it about a very aggressive Chinese expansionist policy where it's trying to change the world order? And most of the key players across the world, especially in the Indo-Pacific region like Australia, are now getting to feel that the dynamics that have been set in, especially as far as the business interest or the exports of the country are concerned, they need to be readjusted. And they need to be readjusted in a long-term perspective.
Anusha, I'll just mention one very important thing here is that, China has weaponized the market. Chinese market is huge compared to that of India. It's much bigger, but China has weaponized the market in the sense that if you do business in China, you have to have certain conditions. One condition mean that, you cannot speak against that country. You cannot even raise your questions. And when it comes to investment in China, there are a lot of conditions applied. It's not that transparent. Comparatively, India, we may not agree to a full-fledged free trade agreement, but American companies or other companies, and the Australians are taking the cue from them. They're far more comfortable while working in India even if they have a dispute with government of India, they can go to the court. And at times the court has given a verdict which is even against the government and have given the verdict in favor of corporations. So the corporations or any kind of company actually looks for stability. That stability India gives in terms of continuity of business, and they don't enmesh geopolitics or all the time or political issues all the time. With business. That is the problem. It doesn't mean that China, Australia is completely doing away with China. They're hedging. It's what they're doing is basically a hedging factor. Other important point is that, the Australian companies are looking for a market which has deep penetration. Today, the kind of market India is giving up, and of course, over the last few years, you have seen certain level of reforms that have happened in terms of labor reforms. India has shown its industrial proficiency in the vaccine and many other areas. India also benefits out of it because we are also trying to develop something called the resilient supply chain under the production-linked incentive scheme. And in 13 to 14 sectors, we are allowing companies to come and invest in this country, from semiconductors to robotics to green energy to electric vehicles, the whole supply chain. Australians see a potential and a long-term security of investment here. That is where they're coming. It's not a charity.
Pathikrit, I'm going to interrupt you there because Manjuji is back with us on the broadcast. I want her view also on this matter. Manju, say your opinion about how Canberra is trying to hedge, as Pathikrit points out, its business interest. And do you agree that China has weaponized its economic and business interests across the world? That's the policy it's pursuing.
Absolutely. We can see it happening everywhere, even including under the BRI and, the other in Pakistan. Everywhere we can see it happening. They are weaponizing their investments and their trade. And as I said earlier, Australian imports were suddenly blocked. So they're very clear in their minds that you're with us or against us. And this has led to other countries as well, and Australia particularly, and Japan, to look for to diversify its economy, to diversify its trade basket and investment basket into a country which they feel is an important member of the Quad, of course. And also, they feel that there will be more stability here, and they will not be, facing the same kind of problems. Because initially, China has, in most cases, people have, the feedback or what we hear from other countries is initially it is all very hunky-dory.